You already know more than you believe. You simply haven't yet learned to read the signs. Think about it. How many times have you trusted someone's words, only to feel the sting of betrayal later? How often have you returned a smile, sensing deep down that the kindness was merely a mask? The truth is an uncomfortable one. Most people are not who they appear to be. Their words are rehearsed, their confidence is borrowed, their happiness a performance. And yet, the Stoics taught that every mask eventually cracks, that no lie can fully silence the truth that burns beneath the surface. If you dare to see beyond appearances, you will uncover not just who others are, but who you are in relation to them. This is not a path to judgment. It is a path to liberation. Because once you see the world clearly, you can no longer be deceived. You can finally live with the strength of someone unshaken by illusion. If you feel that pull toward clarity, consider this an invitation, a choice for yourself, a commitment to wisdom, to growth, and to walking the Stoic path toward truth in a world built on masks. Truth 1. Everyone wears a mask. Have you ever wondered why relationships can feel so profoundly confusing? Why we sometimes place our trust in someone, only to feel deceived later on? Why the person who seems the happiest often carries the deepest sorrow? The difficult truth is that people rarely reveal who they really are. What you see on the surface is not the whole story. It is a mask, carefully constructed over years of trying to survive in a world that demands conformity. The Stoics understood this well. They knew that human beings craft personas the way a soldier crafts armor, not because we are malicious, but because life has taught us that revealing our true selves can be a dangerous risk. Think back to childhood. We learn very quickly what earns us approval and what leads to rejection. Some children discover that being funny makes them beloved, so they carry that humor into adulthood, even on days they feel crushed inside. Others find that toughness earns respect, so they walk through life behind a hardened shell, even if that shell conceals a profound tenderness and fear. This is why the world so often feels like a stage. As Carl Jung once said, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is." This persona, this mask, is not inherently evil. It helps us navigate society, but it is not the truth. Pay attention to the small cracks, the laugh that lingers a moment too long, the sudden avoidance of eye contact when a personal topic is mentioned, the subtle shift in tone when a sensitive subject arises. These are the moments the mask trembles, and the real person beneath shows through, if only for an instant. Let's make this real. You might know someone who always positions themselves as the strong one. They never complain. They carry everyone else's burdens and appear unshakable, but watch them closely when they think no one is looking. You might notice the tension in their jaw, or the way they fall silent when vulnerability enters a conversation. Their mask of strength exists to protect the fragility they hide underneath. On the other hand, consider the perpetually cheerful person, the one making jokes, smiling through every difficulty. Their humor has become a survival strategy. The mask of joy shields them from a sadness they cannot bear to admit, either to others or to themselves. From a Stoic point of view, recognizing these masks isn't about becoming cynical or judgmental. It is about developing compassion. Because once you see that someone's aggression is a mask for insecurity, or that their endless cheer is a defense against despair, you stop taking their actions personally. You stop being deceived. And instead of reacting with anger, you begin to respond with patience. But this truth has another side. It's not just about reading others, it's about reading yourself. We all wear masks, whether we admit it or not. Perhaps your mask is ambition, keeping you so busy that no one asks about your pain. Perhaps it's humor, or silence, or a need for control. If you wish to see others clearly, you must first ask yourself, what mask do I wear to survive? This is a deeply Stoic practice, not of self-condemnation, but of self-awareness. It is the act of stripping away your own illusions so that you might live closer to the truth. As Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Examining your masks is part of that work. Ask yourself, when do I feel the need to perform? When do I laugh, not because something is funny, but because I don't want to answer the real question? When do I put on a show of strength, not because I feel strong, but because I fear being seen as weak? By confronting these questions, you begin to dissolve the distance between the mask and the true self. Now let's return to how this helps you read others. Imagine you are in a conversation with someone who constantly interrupts. The mask proclaims, I am confident. I know what I'm talking about. But if you look past that facade, you might hear the truth whispering, I am afraid of being ignored. Or consider the person who brags endlessly about their achievements. The mask declares, I am successful. The truth beneath it confesses, I am terrified that I am not enough. Once you see this pattern, it is impossible to unsee, and that is a powerful realization, because it not only makes you harder to deceive, it also makes you harder to hate. As Aristotle observed, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Knowing others follows the same path. The moment you realize that everyone is hiding something, not out of malice but out of fear, you stop expecting perfection. You stop demanding authenticity on command. Instead, you learn to look for the glimpses of the real self that shine through the cracks. And those glimpses, however small, are more valuable than the entire performance. This is where Stoicism offers more than just psychological insight. It offers a moral direction. The goal of reading masks is not to manipulate or exploit people. It is to live wisely, with less illusion. It is to extend compassion where others seem unbearable. Because once you realize that the harsh critic is hiding a wounded child, or the bully is masking a deep-seated fear, your entire response changes. You gain a new kind of freedom. You stop being reactive. Here is a practical step you can try immediately. The next time you are in a conversation, listen not just to the words, but observe the silence and the body language. Watch for the flicker in the eyes when a sensitive topic comes up. Notice the way someone shifts in their seat when they're uncomfortable, or the forced laugh that doesn't match the tone of the moment. These small signals are the cracks in the mask. At the same time, catch yourself. Notice when you slip into your own mask, when you smile and don't mean it, when you say, I'm good, when you are not, when you hide behind sarcasm because you are actually hurt. The Stoic path is about living in alignment with truth, and that begins with honesty toward yourself. So the next time you look at someone and feel that something doesn't add up, do not dismiss that feeling. Pay attention. People reveal themselves in the smallest of ways, and when you learn to notice the slips, you will see that everyone is fighting the same battle, the battle between the mask they wear and the truth they fear. Recognizing this won't make you colder. It will make you wiser, and it will open the door to connections that go far beyond the surface. Truth 2. Criticism is confession. It is easy to become defensive when someone criticizes you. A harsh comment, a mocking tone, a judgment that stings, and instantly your guard goes up. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that criticism is a reflection of our own shortcomings. But a deeper truth lies waiting to be understood. Criticism almost always reveals more about the critic than the one being judged. People rarely attack from a place of pure clarity. They attack because something within them has been stirred, something unresolved, something they refuse to face. The flaws they condemn in others are often a mirror, reflecting the very things they are trying to hide within themselves. Think about the last time you heard someone endlessly complain about another person's arrogance. He's so full of himself. She's always bragging. That kind of constant critique feels personal. But if you look closer, it is usually a confession. Behind the accusation lives a deep insecurity. Perhaps the critic fears they are not good enough, so the sight of arrogance in others triggers their own hidden longing to be admired. As Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. What you resent in the outer world is often a reflection of what you have repressed within. This is why criticism so often feels exaggerated. When someone despises dishonesty in others, it may be because they themselves struggle to be fully honest. When someone relentlessly mocks emotional people, it may be because they are terrified of their own feelings. This is projection. As the Stoics understood, the true battlefield is not out in the world. It is within our own minds. Let's make this practical. Imagine you're at work, and a colleague constantly accuses others of being lazy. On the surface, it seems they are merely concerned with productivity. But if you step back, you might realize this person is deeply insecure about their own worth. They fear being seen as unproductive, so they project that fear outward, attacking others for the very thing they are most afraid of becoming. Or picture the friend who cannot stop gossiping about how fake everyone else is. They are obsessed with exposing inauthenticity. But beneath that obsession may live a painful truth. They themselves feel inauthentic, disconnected from their real self, and gossip becomes a way to deflect from that wound. Once you begin to see this, your relationship with criticism changes forever. Instead of reacting with the immediate sting of hurt, you learn to pause. You step into the Stoic mindset, calm, observant, and deeply curious. You ask yourself, what does this reveal about them? What are they wrestling with that makes this trait in me so unbearable for them to see? This transformation of judgment into insight allows you to hold on to your peace instead of letting someone else's pain dictate your emotions. And here is the empowering part. This truth doesn't just help you understand others. It helps you understand yourself. Ask yourself honestly, what bothers you most in other people? Do you despise arrogance? Perhaps you are struggling with your own need for validation. Do you hate dishonesty? Perhaps there are truths in your own life you have not fully admitted. Do you detest weakness in others? Perhaps you are terrified of your own vulnerability. Criticism is a mirror. What you condemn in others may be pointing toward something you need to heal in yourself. Socrates offered a clue when he said, "Let him that would move the world first move himself." If you want to grow, begin by examining the patterns of criticism in your own mind. Each judgment you make may be a confession waiting to be heard. The Stoic practice here is one of self-scrutiny, to notice when your irritation is less about reality and more about your own fears echoing back at you. Imagine you're scrolling online and find yourself rolling your eyes at someone posting endless selfies. Before you criticize, pause. Ask yourself, why does this bother me? Is it because I truly value humility? Or is it because I, too, crave recognition but feel ashamed to admit it? The more you practice this, the more honest you become with yourself. And the more honest you are with yourself, the less power criticism from others will hold over you. This is where compassion enters the picture. When you see criticism as confession, you stop hating people for their harshness. Instead, you see them as human beings battling themselves. The person who mocks emotion is confessing a fear of their own feelings. The one who calls others weak is confessing their own inner fragility. The one who tears down another's success is confessing their own longing for achievement. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it softens your heart. You may still need to protect yourself from cruelty, The Stoics were not naive. But you will no longer waste your energy on hatred. Here is a practice you can try. The next time someone criticizes you, instead of rushing to defend yourself, simply breathe. Let the words land, but do not let them define you. Then, quietly ask, what does this reveal about them? Do this not in a mocking way, but with philosophical curiosity. Their criticism may say more about their story than it does about your character. And if there is truth in what they say, use it. If there is not, let it go. Either way, you win. Criticism is confession. Once you understand this, you step into a new kind of freedom. You no longer carry the weight of every harsh word. You no longer let other people's projections disturb your peace. You become, as the Stoics taught, anchored, not swayed by the winds of opinion, but rooted in clarity. So the next time someone tears into you, don't just hear their words. Listen for the confession hidden beneath them. It might change how you see them. And if you are brave enough, it might just change how you see yourself. Truth 3. Silence is louder than words. There is a unique tension that fills the air when a person falls silent. You have likely felt it. You ask a direct question, perhaps something personal, and instead of an answer, you are met with hesitation, a pause, a swift change of subject. They might laugh it off or reply with a short, vague line that feels rehearsed. On the surface, it may seem like nothing, a simple absence of words. But if you listen closely, you will find that silence is rarely empty. It is charged with meaning. It tells you more about a person's truth than their carefully chosen words ever could. Human beings are masters of language. We are trained from childhood to use words as shields, to protect ourselves, to avoid judgment, to gain approval. We learn what is safe to say and what is better left unsaid. But in those moments when words fail and the mask slips, you catch a glimpse of what someone truly feels. In that space, silence becomes a confession. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius reflected that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and even when people choose not to speak, their silence still carries the color of their inner world. Think of an argument. The loudest person in the room is not always the most truthful, the one shouting, defending, insisting. They are often trying to drown out their own doubt. But the person who suddenly grows quiet when a topic hits too close to home, that quietness reveals a different kind of truth. It is the unspoken admission. This hurts me. This scares me. This touches something I do not want to expose. Words can be manipulated, rehearsed, and refined. But silence often leaks the raw, unvarnished truth. Seneca observed that speech is the index of the mind. But what someone chooses not to say is just as telling as what they do. When someone dodges a question about their past, when they gloss over a painful subject, when they give a flat answer where emotion should be, that silence becomes an index of their fear. You are not just hearing words, you are hearing the boundaries of what they cannot yet face. Consider an everyday example. Imagine asking a friend how they are really doing after a breakup. They smile and say, "I'm fine." But their voice is flat, their eyes look away, and they immediately change the subject. That silence between the words, that subtle, emotional void, is a truth far louder than their claim. They are not fine, they just don't feel safe enough to admit it. Or think of a coworker who avoids all conversation about mistakes. They will talk endlessly about their successes, but the moment a failure is mentioned, the conversation suddenly dries up. That avoidance is the silence that reveals the wound. This is why silence is so powerful to read. People lie without even realizing it, repeating stories they have told themselves until they believe them. But silence resists that polish. It slips out in the cracks. Here is where the Stoic perspective adds depth. When you notice these silences, the goal is not to judge, but to understand. The temptation is to label avoidance as weakness, but the Stoics remind us that all people carry burdens. Everyone has truths they are not yet ready to face. Instead of reacting with frustration, you can approach those silences with compassion, because chances are you have your own. Think of the moments you have stayed quiet when you could have spoken. The times you said, "I'm fine," when you were not. The times you avoided vulnerability because it felt too raw. In this way, silence connects us, for it is a defense mechanism we all share. To truly examine life, your own and others, you must learn to study silence. It tells you where the examination has stopped, where fear has drawn a line. And often, those are the very places where healing is most needed. If you listen carefully, silence shows you not just who someone is, but where they are still hiding. In close relationships, silence becomes even louder. A partner who falls silent during discussions about the future may be carrying an uncertainty they cannot yet voice. A friend who never speaks of their family may be holding on to unhealed wounds. The silence around these subjects is not random. It is protective. And when you notice it, you are given a choice. You can push and demand answers, or you can approach with patience and empathy, creating a space where that silence might eventually feel safe enough to become words. And that is the empowering part. Silence does not have to be permanent. With courage, it can be broken. The Stoics encouraged speaking truth, but with wisdom and restraint. They believed in honesty not as a reckless spilling of everything, but as a path to inner peace. Here is a practical step you can try. The next time you are in a conversation, instead of rushing to respond, pause. Listen not only to what is said, but to what is not. Notice the hesitations, the quick deflections, the short answers that don't match the depth of the question. Ask yourself, what truth might be hiding in that silence? And in your own life, take time to reflect on the things you avoid talking about. You will be surprised by how much you learn about yourself by examining your own silences. Remember, reading silence is not about exposing people. It is about understanding them. The Stoics taught that wisdom is not about control, but clarity. When you see silence for what it is, you stop being fooled by words alone. You start reading the spaces between them. And in those spaces, you discover a deeper layer of truth. Plato once observed that wise men speak because they have something to say, while fools speak because they have to say something. But there is another layer to this wisdom. Sometimes people stay silent not because they have nothing to say, but because the truth feels too heavy to voice. That silence is not emptiness. It is fear, and fear is always worth noticing. The more you practice this, the more you will realize how loud silence can be. It echoes in relationships, in workplaces, in friendships. It tells you what people cannot yet admit, and it shows you where you, too, still carry unspoken stories. The Stoic way is to see this clearly, without bitterness, to understand that silence is not a void, but a map of where healing is needed. So, the next time silence falls after a difficult question, do not rush to fill it. Do not dismiss it as empty space. Instead, pause. Listen. For that silence is not a void. It is a vessel. It holds a clue, a window, a whisper of truth. And once you learn to hear its language, you will never experience conversation in the same way again. We live in a world that often values the shadow over the substance, the appearance of virtue over its reality. You have felt it, haven't you? This endless broadcast of goodness, kindness, and moral conviction. A grand performance staged for an audience of strangers, waiting for applause. Social media has amplified this spectacle into a deafening roar. The constant declarations of purity, honesty, or moral superiority often feel hollow, and deep down, you sense that something is amiss. Because when a person is truly virtuous, they feel no need to convince anyone. Their actions are their testament. It is the loud signal, the constant reminder, the exaggerated performance that should compel you to pause and look deeper. Think of it in the rhythm of daily life. The one who relentlessly preaches honesty is often the first to bend the truth when it serves them. The one who boasts of their humility is usually starved for recognition. And the one who loudly condemns the flaws in others is often hiding those same flaws within themselves. The philosopher Seneca warned against this very performance, writing, "The wise man is content with himself." That line is a key, unlocking the essence of genuine virtue. If you are truly good, you do not need to announce it. You require no applause, no validation, no public ceremony. You simply are. But the one who constantly signals their moral superiority is not content. They are restless, uneasy, desperate for others to ratify the image they so carefully project. Let's bring this down to the human scale. Imagine two people. One quietly donates to a cause they believe in, never speaking of it, never seeking acknowledgement. The other ensures everyone knows of their donation, posting photographs with inspirational captions, reminding the world of their generosity. Which of these two possesses the stronger character? The answer is self-evident. But here is the deeper question. Why does the second person feel the need to broadcast their deed? So often, it is because they are trying to convince themselves. By loudly signaling their virtue, they hope to silence the inner whisper of insecurity that says, "Maybe you're not as good as you think you are." True virtue is not a one-time performance. It is consistent action. It is lived in the quiet moments when no one is watching. It is the daily choice to act with integrity, even when no applause will ever follow. Virtue signaling, by contrast, is a collection of visible acts, moments designed for an audience. And that is the great divide. One is habit, the other is theater. Plato warned us against mistaking shadows for reality. In his allegory of the cave, he showed how people can become trapped watching mere appearances, believing them to be the truth. Virtue signaling is our modern cave, its projections flickering on the wall. They look like morality, they sound like morality, but they are not the real thing. Our task is to turn from the shadows and seek the substance. This truth becomes undeniable when you observe those who condemn others most loudly. Have you ever noticed how the harshest critics of immorality so often end up ensnared in scandals of their own? This is no coincidence. It is a confession. By projecting their righteousness with such force, they attempt to conceal what they are ashamed to face in themselves. The Stoic teacher Epictetus offered a way out of this trap. He said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That wisdom cuts across centuries, its edge still sharp today. If you live with honesty, you don't need to remind people of it. If you live with kindness, you don't need to advertise it. The moment you feel the urge to shout your virtue from the rooftops, it is likely you have already strayed from its path. Loud virtue is not about embodiment, it is about persuasion. Consider how this plays out in our relationships. A friend who constantly insists on their loyalty may possess none. Their repeated declarations are a red flag, for when loyalty is genuine, it needs no promotion. It simply exists. Or think of the colleague who constantly boasts of being a team player, only to undermine others when it suits their ambition. Their words and actions are misaligned, and the louder the words, the weaker the alignment. The Stoic way is to focus on being, letting reputation follow naturally, or not at all. Now, let us turn this lens upon ourselves, for it is easy to see this truth in others, but far harder to admit it in our own lives. Ask yourself, when do I signal virtue instead of living it? Do I boast about my honesty because, deep down, I am afraid of my own half-truths? Do I overemphasize kindness in public while wrestling with resentment in private? We have all done it. It is part of the human condition. The goal is not self-shame, but recognition. The recognition of those moments when performance overtakes substance. That awareness is the first step back to authenticity. So here is the personal challenge. Strive to live your values so quietly, so consistently, that you never need to announce them. Let your actions be your proof. If you are honest, people will see it. If you are kind, people will feel it. If you are loyal, people will know it. No announcement required. The next time you encounter someone loudly proclaiming their virtue, do not be fooled by the performance. Look deeper. And in your own life, resist the temptation to advertise your goodness. Simply live it. Because real strength never needs a microphone. One of the most difficult truths of human nature is this. People are not only dishonest with others, they are profoundly dishonest with themselves. In fact, most deception does not begin as an attempt to fool the outside world. It begins inside, as a story whispered in the quiet moments of fear, shame, or regret. Think of how many times you've heard someone say, "I'm fine," when their entire being radiates distress. Or, "I don't care anymore," when their heart is still ablaze with feeling. Or, "I'm over it," when you can hear the bitterness clinging to their voice. These are not calculated lies meant for you. They are rehearsals, stories told to convince the self. Self-deception is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. Why? Because reality can be unbearable. When the truth feels too heavy, too painful, too threatening to our identity, the mind invents a version it can live with. It is not always malicious. Sometimes it is a matter of survival. The Stoics, however, saw this tendency not as a harmless comfort, but as a dangerous prison that prevents all growth. Seneca asked, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" That question strikes at the very core of self-deception, because the lies we tell ourselves are so often forms of delay. I'll change tomorrow. I'll face it when I'm ready. I'll deal with it later. But later stretches into years, and the lies calcify into a life that never moves forward. Consider heartbreak, an experience we all know. When someone is rejected, they often declare, "I don't care." It is the easiest lie to tell. But if you look into their eyes, if you listen to the subtle tremor in their voice, you can feel that they care more than they can admit. The lie is a shield against pain, but it is also a barrier to healing. You cannot truly recover from a wound you refuse to acknowledge. This is why the Stoics placed such emphasis on aligning perception with truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." This is the antidote to self-deception. A radical honesty, a willingness to see clearly, even when it hurts. The paradox is that self-deception feels protective in the moment but is destructive over time. Think of someone in a toxic relationship, repeating the mantra, "It's not that bad," or "They'll change." The story offers short-term comfort, because facing the truth, that they are trapped, feels overwhelming. But the longer they cling to the lie, the deeper their suffering becomes. So if you wish to truly read people, Listen not only to their words, but to the tension that hums beneath them. When someone says, "I've moved on," but their body stiffens at the mention of an old partner's name, believe the body. When someone insists, "I'm not jealous," while their eyes flash with envy, trust the flash. The contradiction is not hypocrisy. It is blindness. They have convinced themselves of a story, and now the story is running their life. You can use this truth not only to understand others, but to liberate yourself. Start by asking, what lies do I tell myself? Do I say I'm fine when I'm not? Do I minimize my pain because I fear it will overwhelm me? Do I pretend I don't care to avoid the sting of disappointment? The Stoics would urge you to face the sting directly, to accept the pain without adding the second, heavier layer of deception. Pain, they taught, is a part of life. But self-deception turns pain into suffering. So how do we move past this? The first step is awareness. Pay attention to your own words. Notice when you repeat phrases like, "I don't care," or "I'm fine." Ask yourself, is this real, or is this a shield? The second step is courage, the bravery to admit when you are hurt, scared, or not over something. Honesty with yourself is the foundation of all strength, because once you face reality, you can finally work with it. You can heal, adapt, and grow. So remember this. The next time you hear someone say, "I'm fine," pause. Look past the words. Ask yourself, are they telling me the truth? Or are they trying to tell it to themselves? That small shift in perception will change how you see people forever. And if you are willing to turn that same question inward, it will change how you see yourself. We have all met that person, the one who walks into a room and immediately begins to broadcast their own importance. Perhaps they boast endlessly of their achievements, or interrupt every conversation to steer it back to themselves. Or perhaps more subtly, they belittle others to maintain their position at the top. At first, they can seem confident, even intimidating. But if you look closer, if you peel back the layers of that performance, you will find something else hiding beneath. That display of superiority is almost always a mask, and behind it lies something fragile. A deep, gnawing fear of being overlooked, dismissed, or forgotten. The Stoics were masters at seeing through such appearances. They understood that real strength has no need to prove itself. As Seneca wrote, "It is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness." Greatness is not about bragging once you have arrived. It is about quietly enduring the road to get there. Those who constantly need to announce their own greatness are often revealing just how insecure they are about its reality. The psychologist Carl Jung framed it this way: where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. When someone relentlessly seeks domination, control, or superiority, it is not because they are overflowing with confidence. It is because they are lacking something essential inside. They chase superiority to fill a void, and the louder they boast, the emptier they often feel. Let's make this practical. Imagine a coworker who cannot stop reminding everyone of their accomplishments. On the surface, it looks like confidence. But watch closely, and you will notice their desperation for recognition. They fear that if they stop proving themselves for even a moment, they will become invisible. Their superiority is not strength. It is a defense against their own feelings of inferiority. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, reminded himself daily not to fall into this trap. He wrote, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions." Those who seek superiority tie their well-being to the opinions of others. True, Stoic confidence ties it to inner stability. Think of the person who must win every argument. Even over the smallest detail, they cannot bear to be corrected. What kind of person fears being wrong so much that they must dominate every conversation? It is someone terrified that being wrong makes them unworthy. Their intellectual superiority is a mask for their fear of inadequacy. And here is the crucial part. People who wear this mask often do not know they are wearing it. But defenses built on illusion are fragile. Sooner or later, the cracks begin to show. The person who constantly brags eventually reveals their deep need for validation. The person who belittles others exposes their own hidden shame. Let us turn this question inward. When do I feel the need to prove myself? When do I exaggerate my accomplishments or belittle others to feel taller? These are the signals of our own hidden insecurities. The Stoic path is not to cover them with noise, but to face them with courage. In relationships, this truth is especially clear. A partner who constantly reminds you how lucky you are, who dominates conversations and minimizes your voice, is rarely as confident as they appear. Their superiority is a shield, protecting old wounds. And the louder the performance, the more fragile those wounds are likely to be. Here is the practical takeaway. When you encounter someone projecting superiority, do not be intimidated. Look for the insecurity beneath. Ask yourself, what are they afraid of? What fear is driving this performance? Once you see that, their arrogance loses its power over you. And in your own life, remember that the need to prove yourself is a signal to pause and look inward. When you accept your own vulnerabilities, you no longer need to conceal them. So the next time someone boasts, belittles, or dominates, do not be deceived. Remember that superiority is often a mask for inferiority. Real confidence is quiet. Real power does not need to perform. The strongest person in the room is never the loudest. It is the one who has nothing left to prove. This leads us to a fundamental truth about human nature. Fear is the engine of most behavior. If you truly wish to understand why people act as they do not begin by asking what they desire. Begin by asking what they fear. Most human behavior, from the smallest habit to the most significant life choice, is guided less by the pursuit of joy and more by the avoidance of pain. It is an uncomfortable truth to admit, but reflect on it. How many times have you said yes when you meant to say no, simply to avoid disappointing someone? How often have you remained silent when you longed to speak, held back by the fear of looking foolish? These are not choices born of desire. They are born of fear. Consider the many forms fear takes. The person who talks too much may not be arrogant. They may be terrified of being ignored, filling the silence before rejection can find a foothold. The person who vanishes when things become difficult is not always careless. Often, they are so afraid of failing that they choose to disappear rather than face that fear head-on. And the one who constantly agrees, whose yes is a mask for an internal scream of no, is not spineless. They are afraid of losing connection. Their compliance is driven by a deep-seated fear of rejection. To truly read people, you must look beneath the surface and ask, what are they afraid of losing? Think of how fear sculpts our very identity. The person who must always be in control does not necessarily crave power. They fear the chaos that comes with losing it. The one who seeks constant approval does not truly want compliments. They fear being invisible without them. The person who avoids conflict at all costs does not inherently love peace. They fear the rejection and abandonment that might follow if they dare to rock the boat. Fear hides beneath layers of behavior, like a root system beneath a tangle of branches. To understand the branches, you must first uncover the root. This understanding becomes a powerful tool in daily life. When someone's actions seem strange, do not just ask what they are doing. Ask what they are afraid of. The boss who micromanages every detail? They are afraid of failure. The friend who cannot stop gossiping? They are afraid of their own irrelevance. The partner who clings too tightly? They are afraid of being abandoned. If you train yourself to see behavior through the lens of fear, people become far easier to comprehend. What once seemed confusing or irrational suddenly makes sense when you trace it back to its source. Aristotle believed courage to be the highest virtue, for it is the one that makes all other virtues possible. Without courage, honesty crumbles under the fear of judgment. Kindness shrinks under the fear of rejection. Wisdom remains buried under the fear of making a mistake. This is why the Stoics placed such importance on confronting fear, not by pretending it doesn't exist, but by meeting it with reason and resolve. Consider how fear shapes not just individuals, but entire groups. Socrates warned, "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." Many people fill their schedules to the brim, not from a love of productivity, but from a fear of stillness. In the quiet, they might have to meet themselves, and that encounter terrifies them. Others chase wealth, not from a true desire for riches, but from a fear of insignificance. Entire cultures are molded by collective fears, the fear of being weak, of losing status, of being forgotten. But herein lies the trap. Because fear is so universal, most people fail to see how profoundly it shapes them. They believe they are acting from desire or choice, when in reality, fear is steering the wheel. Plato hinted at this when he said, "Courage is knowing what not to fear." Wisdom, then, is not the elimination of fear, but the ability to distinguish which fears are illusions and which truths demand our attention. So, how do you apply this? Start by observing the moments when someone overreacts. An overreaction is often fear spilling out. The person who becomes irrationally angry at being interrupted may not be angry at all. They may be afraid of being dismissed. The person who panics over small changes is not being dramatic. They are afraid of losing control. If you listen closely, you will notice fear hiding behind countless ordinary behaviors. And if you look inward, you will find the same is true for yourself. Seneca reminded us, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." How often do we suffer in advance, rehearsing our fears before anything has even happened? That suffering creates patterns. It shapes how we interact, what we avoid, and what we pursue. The behaviors we least understand in others, and in ourselves, can often be explained by this pre-suffering of imagined fears. The empowering shift comes when you stop asking, "What do they want?" and start asking, "What are they afraid to lose?" That single question can reveal more than hours of conversation, because at their core, our greatest fears are universal. The loss of love, of respect, of security, of meaning. These are the forces that drive people to actions they cannot even explain to themselves. So the next time you see someone talking too much, disappearing when life gets hard, or agreeing when they clearly mean no, look beneath the behavior. You will likely find fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of humiliation. And once you see it, you will realize something profound. People are not difficult to understand. They are just afraid to be seen. This brings us to our next truth. Judgment is projection. Have you ever noticed how quick people are to judge? A stranger mocks someone's appearance online. A coworker criticizes another's work with excessive energy. A friend rolls their eyes at someone for being too sensitive. On the surface, it appears they are simply pointing out flaws. But if you watch closely, you realize something deeper is at play. Judgment says far more about the one judging than the one being judged. People project what they cannot accept within themselves. Think of how this unfolds in daily life. The person who mocks sensitivity often struggles with their own emotions. They see someone cry and they sneer, because that vulnerability holds up a mirror to the part of themselves they fear. Consider the person who relentlessly criticizes others' appearances. Their harsh words are not a true assessment, but a confession of how much they despise their own reflection. Here, judgment is a confession in disguise. Or take arrogance. When someone constantly accuses others of being full of themselves, it may not be arrogance they hate, but their own buried longing for recognition. They see in others what they secretly crave, but are ashamed to admit. Interestingly, projection applies not only to negative traits, but also to what we admire. When we find ourselves idolizing someone's courage, wisdom, or confidence, that too can be a projection, reflecting qualities we long to cultivate in ourselves. As Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Deep admiration can be your unconscious mind pointing to a part of yourself that is waiting to grow. But in the realm of judgment, projection is often a symptom of pain. Think about gossip. On the surface, it seems like harmless entertainment, but at its root, gossip is usually projection. People tear others down to quiet their own insecurities. They laugh at flaws that remind them of their own, as if mocking another's failure makes their own easier to bear. The Stoic challenge is to turn that judgment inward before we aim it outward. Epictetus advised us to focus only on what is within our control. Another person's character is beyond our control. Our reaction to it is entirely our own. And if our reaction is harsh judgment, the wise move is to ask, why? What in me is being triggered? Why does this bother me so much? Following that line of inquiry often uncovers the hidden fears and desires we have been avoiding. Imagine someone who constantly ridicules lazy people. At first, you might think they simply value hard work. But look deeper. Perhaps they are terrified of being seen as lazy themselves. Perhaps they grew up in a family where their worth was measured only by their productivity. Their harsh judgment of others is a defense against their own deep-seated insecurity. It is just as important to turn this truth upon yourself. Ask, what traits do I judge most harshly in others? Do I sneer at arrogance? Do I despise dishonesty? Do I grow impatient with weakness? Each of those judgments may be a signal pointing back to you. Perhaps you judge arrogance because you secretly crave recognition. Perhaps you hate dishonesty because you struggle to face certain truths. Perhaps you despise weakness because you fear your own vulnerability. Judgment, when examined honestly, becomes a teacher. When you can admit that what you see in them might be a reflection of you, judgment transforms from condemnation into self-discovery. As Carl Jung warned, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Projection exists because most of us cannot do this. We cannot accept our flaws, so we exile them onto others. But when you begin the practice of radical self-examination, you start to reclaim those projections. You begin to accept your own humanity, flaws and all, and once you accept yourself, the need to judge others begins to fade. The practical step is simple. When judgment arises, pause. Ask yourself, is this truly about them, or is it about me? And when others judge you, do not immediately react. Ask, what are they revealing about themselves? This practice turns judgment from a wound into a window. You are no longer pierced by it. Instead, you learn from it. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to meet the flaws of others with patience, writing, "When you wake in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Notice his posture, not anger or surprise, but calm recognition. He understood that these flaws are human, often projections of pain, that wisdom can guide us too. So the next time someone mocks, criticizes, or attacks, look deeper. Judgment is rarely about the person being judged. It is a mirror held up to the one holding it. Once you learn to read it this way, you will see through the noise. And more importantly, you will see yourself more clearly. This reveals our next truth. Performative confidence is a mask for guilt. We live in a culture that worships the appearance of confidence. We are told to act certain, look strong, and never let them see you sweat. Because of this, you will meet countless people who project an image of being unshakable, their heads held high, their voices firm. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Much of what looks like unbreakable confidence is merely a performance. And beneath that mask lives guilt, regret, and fear. The more someone performs strength, the more you should ask, what are they trying so hard to cover? The Stoics warned against this kind of performance. Seneca advised, "You can tell the character of every man when you see how he gives and receives praise." Watch closely, and you will notice that people wearing fake confidence cannot handle criticism. They become defensive, angry, or dismissive at the slightest pushback. Why? Because their confidence is not real. It is a fragile construction, built atop unresolved guilt. A single crack threatens to expose everything they are hiding. Think of someone who constantly insists on their own competence, talking endlessly about how capable they are. Yet, the moment a mistake is pointed out, they lash out. That is not strength. That is guilt over past failures they have never made peace with. Their exaggerated confidence is merely a shield protecting that wound. You have seen this in leaders. The boss who never admits they are wrong. The politician who doubles down when caught in a lie. Outwardly, they look certain. Inwardly, they are haunted by the guilt of not being enough. Instead of facing that guilt, they cover it with a mask of unshakable certainty. But the cracks are always visible. The defensiveness, the aggression, the inability to sit with humility. Perhaps you know someone who is always the loudest in the room, quick to interrupt, always ready with an answer. They appear self-assured, but notice how they respond when challenged. Do they listen calmly, or do they snap back? If it is the latter, you are witnessing guilt at work. They are not confident in their knowledge. They are afraid of being revealed as less than they pretend to be. Paradoxically, the deepest form of confidence is the ability to admit ignorance without fear, to carry humility without shame. That kind of honesty has no need to perform. But fake confidence can never admit ignorance, for doing so would expose the very guilt it is designed to bury. Guilt is heavy. People carry it for things they have done, words they have spoken, opportunities they have missed, and instead of processing it, they build a persona to cover it. It is easier to pretend to be unshakable than to admit, "I regret what I have done." Plato hinted at this tension between inner reality and outer appearance when he said, "The greatest wealth is to live content with little." Apply this to confidence. The greatest strength is to live content with your limitations, to be at peace with your imperfections. The one who pretends to have it all figured out is never content. Their guilt whispers constantly, and they drown it out by projecting certainty. When have you faked confidence to cover something you regretted? Perhaps you walked into a meeting pretending to be prepared when you were not. We have all done it. But the Stoic way is to confront that honestly. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That applies to confidence too. If it is not real, do not perform it. Instead, face the weakness beneath and grow stronger by admitting it. True confidence is quiet. It does not need to posture. It accepts weakness as part of being human. So, how do you spot fake confidence? Look for overcompensation. The person who always needs to be the smartest, the strongest, the most certain. The one who cannot admit mistakes. The one who grows defensive when questioned. These are signs of guilt and insecurity, not strength. And how do you avoid this trap yourself? Practice the Stoic art of humility. Admit mistakes quickly. Accept ignorance without shame. The paradox is that the less you need to perform confidence, the more confident you become. As Aristotle taught, virtue lies in balance. Confidence in balance is steady, humble, and real. Too little is weakness. Too much, especially when loud and defensive, is guilt in disguise. The balance is found when you live in truth. In relationships, this understanding is transformative. The partner who never apologizes is not secure. They are hiding guilt under a mask of superiority. The friend who dominates every conversation is not brimming with certainty. They are terrified of being unseen. Once you understand this, you stop being fooled by the performance. Real confidence does not need to shout. It does not fear mistakes. It simply exists, steady and quiet, like a mountain. The strongest people you will ever meet are not the ones who look perfect. They are the ones who no longer need to pretend. And finally, our last truth. Exaggeration is the language of insecurity. We have all heard them, those grand, sweeping declarations people love to make. I never care what people think. I'm always happy. Nothing ever bothers me. At first, those words might sound strong, even admirable. But if you listen closely, you will notice a pattern. The more absolute the claim, the less likely it is to be true. Real strength does not need to exaggerate. Exaggeration, more often than not, is the ego turning up the volume to drown out the quiet truth underneath. Think of how this shows up in daily life. The friend who constantly declares they are so over someone usually is not over them at all. The coworker who repeats, "I never get stressed," is often the one secretly losing sleep. The person who insists they always tell the truth is often hiding something. When you hear absolutes, pay attention. They are often compensations, confessions disguised as declarations. Seneca saw through this trap centuries ago. He wrote, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." Exaggeration deceives us in the same way. It paints life in false extremes, when reality is full of nuance. To say, "I am always happy," is to deny half of what it means to be human. To say, "I never struggle," is to hide from the fact that everyone struggles. By exaggerating, people reveal their discomfort with life's balance, their refusal to admit imperfection. At its core, exaggeration is a plea. It is someone saying, "Please believe this about me because I do not fully believe it myself." If they were truly confident, truly at peace, they would not need to make such bold statements. Real confidence is quiet. Real joy does not need constant advertisement. It simply exists. But the deeper insight is this. Exaggeration is not just about deceiving others, it is about deceiving ourselves. We repeat these absolutes in an attempt to convince ourselves they are true. "I never care what people think" becomes a mantra, not because it is a fact, but because the speaker desperately wishes it were. In a way, exaggeration is simply self-deception spoken aloud. Consider our relationships. Imagine a person who constantly insists, "I don't need anyone. I am perfectly fine on my own." While sometimes true, it is often the case that the louder the claim, the more it conceals its opposite, a deep longing for connection, a quiet fear of vulnerability. Or think of the person who declares, "I am always honest." If you watch them closely, you will almost certainly find them bending the truth. The exaggeration is a shield, not a mirror. It is a misuse of the power of words. Instead of revealing truth, exaggeration twists language to hide it. Yet the irony is that in its hiding, it also reveals. The louder the exaggeration, the more the fragile truth beneath it becomes visible to anyone paying attention. So, what does Stoicism teach us about this? First, it teaches us not to take exaggerated claims at face value, but to read the insecurity humming beneath them. When someone says, "I'm always happy," hear the whisper, "I'm afraid to admit when I am sad." When they say, "I never need help," hear the quiet truth, "I don't know how to ask for it." By learning to hear what exaggeration hides, you begin to see people with greater clarity. Second, examine your own exaggerations. When do you reach for absolutes? Do you tell people, "I don't care," when in fact you do? Do you insist, "I'm fine," when you are struggling? These declarations are windows into your own insecurities. Consider how this applies to leadership. A leader who constantly insists, "I always know what to do," is not leading from a place of wisdom, but from a fortress of insecurity. The truly wise leader can say, "I don't know," without shame. Marcus Aurelius ruled the known world, yet he filled his journals with daily reminders of his own flaws, his fears, and his need for humility. That is true confidence, grounded, quiet, and real. It is the very opposite of exaggeration. Carl Jung offered another vital truth. Where your fear is, there is your task. Exaggeration often points directly to our fear. If someone exaggerates their independence, they likely fear dependence. If they exaggerate their happiness, they fear sadness. The exaggerated statement reveals the very place where fear resides. If you listen with discernment, you can learn more from an exaggeration than from any carefully crafted speech. Here is a practice worth trying. The next time you hear someone use an absolute, "I never," or "I always," pause. Ask yourself, what are they really saying? What insecurity lives beneath this claim? And in your own speech, catch your absolutes. Instead of saying, "I never care what people think," try admitting, "Sometimes I care too much." That admission may feel vulnerable, but it is also liberating. Because when you stop exaggerating, you stop hiding. So the next time someone declares with certainty, "I never care what people think," do not take it literally. Hear the fear beneath it. Recognize that exaggeration is the ego's way of turning up the volume to drown out its own insecurity. And in your own life, choose the quieter path. Choose honesty over absolutes, because the strongest truth does not need to shout. It whispers, steadily, without any need for exaggeration at all. Truth. 11. Control means chaos inside. Have you ever noticed how some people cannot relax unless they are in command of everything? They feel a need to manage every detail, correct every minor mistake, and dominate every decision. From the outside, it can look like strength, discipline, or competence. But if you look deeper, you will often find the opposite. This hunger for control is not a sign of stability. It is a symptom of inner chaos. The tighter a person's grip on the world around them, the more likely it is that something inside them feels as if it's slipping away. Carl Jung gave us a clue when he said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." People who try to control everything are often terrified of uncertainty. They want life to fit into a neat, predictable, and safe container. But life does not work that way. It resists control. And when someone cannot accept this truth, they turn their fear both inward and outward, clamping down on everything and everyone around them. What looks like power is usually desperation. Think of the workplace. A boss who refuses to delegate, who insists on approving every small decision, might appear competent. But what they are truly showing is fear. Fear that if they loosen their grip, everything will collapse. Or, in a relationship, a partner who tries to dictate how the other should talk, dress, or even think is not demonstrating love. They are broadcasting insecurity. The need for control is the outward symptom of an inner disorder. Let's make this practical. Consider the micromanager at work. Every email must be copied to them. Every plan must be reviewed 3 times. Their energy drains the team, not because they are strong, but because they cannot handle the anxiety of letting go. Or think of the friend who cannot enjoy a trip unless everything goes exactly as scheduled. The restaurant, the timing, the order of activities. A single deviation can cause their mood to collapse. On the surface, they appear organized. Beneath it, they are wrestling with an inner chaos they cannot quiet. Plato said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." The controlling person has not yet achieved this victory. Instead of conquering their fears, they attempt to conquer their environment. But no amount of external control will ever silence internal chaos. The more they chase it, the more their fragility is exposed. The Stoic way is different. It is not about pretending chaos doesn't exist. It is about meeting it with courage. Epictetus taught his students to say, "Let me see what happens," rather than, "Let me make everything happen." That single shift can transform one's inner life. Instead of clenching, you begin to trust. Instead of forcing, you begin to adapt. And from that space, true strength emerges. Not the brittle strength of control, but the steady strength of peace. Now, think about your own life. When do you try to control too much? Do you rehearse conversations endlessly in your head, afraid of saying the wrong thing? Do you plan everything down to the minute because uncertainty terrifies you? Do you correct others constantly, not out of a need for perfection, but because imperfection makes you anxious? These are not signs of strength. They are signs of the places where fear is still running the show. Aristotle reminded us that virtue lies in balance. Courage is the balance between fear and recklessness. In the same way, healthy order is the balance between chaos and rigidity. The person who cannot tolerate uncertainty has tipped out of balance. Their desire for control reveals a fear of life itself. And life, the Stoics would say, can never be fully controlled, only embraced. Consider relationships again. When one partner feels the need to dictate everything, it often pushes the other away. They may believe control will create security, but it actually destroys it. Love, like life, requires trust. And trust cannot exist in the shadow of control. Socrates hinted at this when he said, "He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have." The controlling person is never content. No matter how much they control, it is never enough, because the real battle is not outside. It is inside. Seneca offered a freeing perspective. He who is brave is free. Freedom does not come from holding on tighter. It comes from releasing the grip, from being brave enough to let life unfold. The controlling person thinks they are strong, but in reality, they are enslaved by their own fear. True strength lies in loosening the grip, in meeting uncertainty with calm rather than panic. And what about you? Can you let go when things don't go according to plan? Can you sit with uncertainty without trying to bend it to your will? The Stoics would encourage you to practice letting go daily. Start small. Leave something unplanned and observe how you respond. Notice the tension that rises inside you when you are not in control. That tension is where the real work begins. So, the next time you meet a micromanager, a controlling partner, or even catch yourself obsessing over every detail, remember this. Control often means chaos inside. The stronger the grip, the more fragile the heart beneath it. And the path to peace is not found in controlling more, but in letting go. and trusting that you can handle life, even when it doesn't go according to plan. Truth 12. Performance signals emptiness. We need not look far to see that much of modern life has become a stage. Open any social media app and you will find carefully curated images, rehearsed captions, and exaggerated displays of happiness, success, and confidence. But this is not limited to the online world. You see it at work, when someone dominates meetings more to be noticed than to contribute. You see it in relationships, when a person plays the role of the perfect partner to cover insecurities they dare not reveal. The louder the performance, the more it often conceals an emptiness within. Real peace does not need a spotlight. It is quiet, steady, and whole, whether anyone is watching or not. The Stoics would have recognized this instantly. They believed that the hunger for external validation is one of the most dangerous traps of human life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That line could have been written today. Performances are built on this very contradiction, caring more about how others see us than about how we truly live. The louder someone performs, the more fragile their inner world often is. Think of someone who constantly brags about how happy they are. Every story, every post, every conversation becomes another declaration of joy. On the surface, it sounds positive. But if happiness is real, it doesn't require constant proof. The more someone insists on their joy, the more likely it is they are wrestling with sadness when the curtain falls. We see this not only in individuals but in entire cultures. The rise of "look at me" energy, the constant self-promotion, the endless updates, the curated perfection, is less a reflection of strength than of a deep collective insecurity. People are terrified of being invisible, so they perform to avoid the silence. Epictetus offered a different path. He told his students, "First, say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." Notice the order. Be before you appear. True character begins with being, not performing. But performance reverses this. It focuses entirely on appearing before others while neglecting the substance underneath. When someone lives this way, they may fool others for a time, but they cannot fool themselves forever. The performance eventually cracks. Let's bring this closer to home. Imagine someone in your circle who must post about every achievement. Every success, no matter how small, becomes a public announcement. At first, it looks like pride. But look closer, and you will notice the need behind it. They are hungry for acknowledgement. Their sense of worth depends on applause. Without it, they feel empty. Or consider the person who always plays the role of the entertainer. They make everyone laugh, keep the mood light, always on stage. Yet when they are alone, the silence feels unbearable. The performance fills the void, but the void remains. Plato, in his Reflections, observed, "The price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men." In the same spirit, the price we pay for indifference to our inner life is to be ruled by performance. When we fail to tend to our own soul, performance takes over, dictating how we act, what we show, and even how we define ourselves. And the cost of that is our authenticity. This is not just a problem for them, it is a challenge for all of us. Ask yourself honestly, when do I perform? Do I post to share my true life, or to make it look better than it feels? Do I smile because I feel joy, or because I fear people will ask questions if I don't? Do I exaggerate my strengths because I am proud, or because I am insecure? These questions are difficult, but the Stoic way is to live with clarity, not illusion. Marcus Aurelius lived at the center of the world's attention. As emperor, his life was a constant performance in the eyes of others, yet his private writings reveal how he resisted that pull. He wrote, "Be content with what you are, and wish not for the things which belong to others." This is the posture of true peace, contentment with being, without the need to perform for others. Imagine how different our lives would feel if we lived this way, with less energy wasted on appearances and more invested in substance. Socrates gave us a model of humility that cuts through performance. He said, "The way to gain a good reputation is to endeavor to be what you desire to appear." Performers invert this. They strive to appear without doing the harder work of becoming. But reputations built on performance are fragile. They collapse the moment reality fails to match the show. Only when we live as we desire to appear, quietly, consistently, does our strength become unshakable. Aristotle, too, spoke of balance. He warned against extremes and praised moderation as the path to virtue. Performance is always an extreme, an overcompensation, a stretching of reality into spectacle. The person who constantly needs to be seen has tipped out of balance, living for appearances instead of substance. The Stoic way is to return to equilibrium, where actions matter more than applause. So what can we do with this truth? First, learn to read performance for what it is. Do not be fooled by the volume. The louder someone needs to broadcast their happiness, their love, or their strength, the more fragile it likely is. Read the insecurity behind the show. Second, watch yourself. Notice when you feel the urge to exaggerate, to display, to perform. Ask yourself, am I doing this to share or to cover, to express or to impress? These questions can save you from wasting your life on stages that do not matter. Remember this: when someone is always performing, always demanding to be seen, it is usually because they do not feel whole when no one is watching. True peace does not need an audience. True strength does not need applause. And the deepest kind of life is not lived as a show. It is lived quietly, steadily, in alignment with who you really are. Truth 13. Pain shapes belief. When someone tells you what they believe, it is tempting to take their words at face value. I don't believe in love. People can't be trusted. Life is meaningless. These statements sound like carefully reasoned conclusions, but if you look deeper, you will find that most beliefs are not born from logic. They are born from wounds. Behind almost every hard opinion there is a scar. People do not just speak from ideas. They speak from experiences that cut them, shaped them, and left a mark they could not forget. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that the mind interprets reality not through pure reason, but through the lens of its own suffering. Epictetus taught, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Notice the distinction. It is not the event itself, but the way the wound is processed that forms the belief. One person loses a job and concludes, I am worthless. Another loses the same job and believes, I am free to start again. The pain is similar. The beliefs it produces are worlds apart. Think of someone you know who is deeply cynical. Perhaps they insist that everyone is selfish, that kindness is always a pretense. At first it seems like a worldview, but if you were to ask where it came from, you would often find a story, a betrayal by someone they trusted, an act of kindness met with cruelty. Their belief is not a detached judgment. It is scar tissue built around an old wound. Seneca said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. But not everyone allows pain to strengthen them. Some allow it to harden them, shaping beliefs that protect them, but also limit them. Let's bring this down to earth. Imagine someone who is abandoned in love. They might adopt the belief that people always leave. That belief becomes a lens through which they see the world. Now, every new relationship is filtered through suspicion. Every moment of closeness is tinged with the fear of loss. The wound shaped the belief, and the belief now reshapes their future experiences. Unless they learn to question it, they will remain trapped in a cycle where pain keeps repeating itself. Carl Jung added another layer to this truth when he wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Not all pain leads to destructive beliefs. For some, pain becomes the foundation of wisdom. The person who was betrayed may learn to value honesty fiercely, not from bitterness, but from clarity. The one who experienced loss may develop a profound gratitude for life's fragile moments. The key difference lies in whether a person confronts the wound or hides from it. Unexamined pain hardens into limiting beliefs. Examined pain can open into wisdom. The Stoics leaned heavily on this practice of examination. Epictetus encouraged reflection each night, reviewing the day, asking where he reacted poorly and where he could improve. This was not just moral discipline, it was psychological hygiene. By reflecting, he prevented pain from quietly hardening into false beliefs. Without reflection, anger becomes, "People are always against me." Fear becomes, "The world is unsafe." But with reflection, pain is seen clearly and transformed into growth. Plato suggested that philosophy begins with wonder, but for many, their philosophy begins with wounds. Their conclusions about life come not from open curiosity, but from closed scars. This explains why some people carry such rigid, bitter beliefs. They are not reasoned positions, they are defenses. The sharper the belief, the deeper the wound behind it. Consider how this plays out in family life. A parent who grew up in poverty might believe that money is everything because the pain of their childhood taught them what it felt like to have nothing. A child who grew up ignored might believe that attention must be earned, shaping how they relate to others for decades. These are not abstract ideas. Their scars have turned into guiding principles, and unless they question where those beliefs came from, they will mistake their trauma for truth. An unexamined wound will always become a belief, and that belief will quietly govern behavior. If someone never examines why they think love is pointless, or why they feel no one can be trusted, they will continue to live inside that belief as if it were reality. To examine one's life means to trace beliefs back to their origins and ask, is this truth or is this my pain speaking? Seneca, reflecting on suffering, said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Beliefs shaped by pain are an opportunity to prove ourselves, to test whether we can transform our wounds into wisdom instead of letting them define us. Pain will shape you, but you have a say in how. So how do we apply this? First, when you hear someone express a harsh belief, resist the urge to argue with logic. Instead, listen for the wound. If someone says, "All relationships are toxic," do not bombard them with counterexamples. Ask yourself, what heartbreak might live behind that statement? When you understand the wound, you can begin to understand the belief. And second, turn the same practice inward. Ask yourself, what beliefs do I carry that might have been shaped by old pain? Do I distrust so easily because I was once betrayed? Do I avoid risk because I once failed? Do I shield myself with cynicism because hope once left a scar? Marcus Aurelius practiced this kind of inner dialogue in his journals. Time and again, he would challenge his own judgments, testing them against the light of reason, reminding himself not to let pain dictate his perception of the world. He refused to allow his wounds to become his philosophy. And this is the Stoic path, to see things clearly, to accept pain without letting it twist you into something you are not. As Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Beliefs born from pain thrive in the unconscious. They become automatic, invisible, guiding our choices without our consent. But the moment you drag them into the light, the moment you ask, "What hurt me into believing this?" you begin to take back your freedom. So the next time you hear someone declare that love isn't real, or that people can't be trusted, do not hear it as simple philosophy. Listen for the story behind it. Every hardened opinion carries a scar. And if you wish to truly understand others and truly understand yourself, you must look not just at the belief, but at the wound that gave it shape. This clarity begins with observation, starting with a simple, powerful test of character: how a person treats the weak. It's easy to be polite when the spotlight is on. Almost anyone can smile at their boss, show respect to the powerful, or treat an authority figure with courtesy. But if you want to know the true measure of a person, don't watch how they treat their superiors. Watch how they treat those who can offer them nothing in return. The waiter, the cashier, the stranger asking for directions, the junior colleague with no influence. That is where true character is revealed, not in how we treat the strong, but in how we treat the vulnerable. Think of it in daily life. A man may be charming to his manager, always respectful, always agreeable. But the moment a server gets his order wrong, he snaps with condescending anger. That single moment tells you more about his character than months of polite behavior at work. A person might treat their partner with affection in public, but dismiss their concerns in private. True character is not a performance. It is consistency, especially when compassion is optional. Why do some people mistreat the powerless? Often it is a projection of their own inner state. They carry deep feelings of powerlessness, so they seize any opportunity to feel superior. Mocking, belittling, or dismissing those they perceive as below them becomes a desperate attempt to patch their own insecurity. Jung called this shadow projection, attacking in others what we cannot face in ourselves. When someone demeans the powerless, it is rarely about the person they are attacking. It is about their own inner emptiness. Aristotle believed the greatest virtues are those most useful to others. By that measure, compassion toward the vulnerable is among the highest of all virtues. It offers no advantage to the self, no gain in status, only a benefit to the other. That is why it's such a pure reflection of character. Helping an equal can be a transaction. Helping the weak is simply human. The figures we remember most in history are not the ones who used power to dominate, but the ones who tempered it with mercy. The generals who spared civilians. The rulers who cared for the poor. The philosophers who took time to teach even the lowest in society. Their strength was not diluted by compassion, it was magnified by it. The Stoics would argue that compassion doesn't weaken power. It reveals whether that power is real in the first place. If someone lashes out at the defenseless, it is because they have not yet conquered themselves. Their anger, their pride, their insecurity still rule them. But the one who can show patience to a child, respect to a servant, or kindness to a stranger, has achieved self-mastery. They are not slaves to their ego, they are free. Think about the relationships in your own life. Perhaps you've known someone who seemed admirable, ambitious, respected, even charismatic, until you saw how they treated people they didn't need. The friend who ignores messages from those they can't benefit from. The partner who is sweet to you, but dismissive toward strangers. The colleague who is helpful to superiors, but cold to interns. These moments are like X-rays. They reveal the truth beneath the surface. Socrates might ask, if a person only treats the powerful with respect, is that respect real, or is it merely fear disguised as virtue? True respect is universal. It does not discriminate by status. When you see someone who treats a janitor with the same dignity as a CEO, you are witnessing integrity in its purest form. This is why compassion is such a profound test of strength. It shows whether you are master of yourself or whether you are ruled by insecurity. So the next time you want to measure someone's strength, don't look at their titles or their achievements. Look at how they treat those with no power over them. That is the truest reflection of who they are. And remember, real strength isn't about crushing the weak. It's about protecting them. Because compassion is not a soft option. It is the highest form of mastery. This lack of self-mastery reveals itself in many ways. One of the most common is a desperate need for attention. We have all met this person, the one who can't stop posting online, the one who floods every conversation with stories about themselves, the one who must always be the center of the room. At first it looks like confidence. They seem bold, charismatic, larger than life. But if you look closer, if you listen to the silence between their words, you will find something else. The performance is not built on strength. It is built on fear. The fear of being forgotten, of fading into the background, of being invisible. The louder the performance, the deeper the wound of neglect. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." People who constantly seek attention are often wrestling with this profound loneliness. They are not loud because they are full of themselves. They are loud because they feel unseen. The attention becomes a substitute for real connection, a way to quiet the inner fear that if no one is watching, they cease to exist. The friend who can't stop posting their perfect life isn't secure in their joy. They are afraid that if they don't perform it, no one will believe they have it. The person who dominates every room doesn't always love the spotlight. They fear the silence, because in the silence, their insecurity echoes back at them. This fear often begins in childhood. A child who grows up unseen, ignored, or dismissed learns that they must perform to earn attention. They become the funny one, the loud one, or the high achiever. Their identity becomes fused with being noticed, because in their mind, to be unseen is to be unloved. As adults, that script doesn't disappear. It just gets louder. Socrates might ask, if your worth depends on being remembered, what happens when memory fades? Are you worthless then? Of course not. Worth does not come from applause. It comes from living truthfully, from acting with integrity, from being who you are even when no one is watching. So, the next time you see someone desperately seeking attention, don't be fooled by the show. See the fear beneath it. Understand that the louder they perform, the emptier they often feel inside. And in your own life, remember, you do not need to be remembered to matter. You only need to live in alignment with truth while you are here. Because in the end, even the names carved into stone will one day erode. But a life lived with courage and kindness shapes eternity in ways no applause ever could. Just as a loud performance can hide fear, a sharp attack can hide a different kind of pain. Envy. It is so easy to mistake envy for hatred. Someone mocks you, criticizes your choices, or dismisses your success, and it feels like pure hostility. But pause. Look closer. Beneath the anger, you will often find something else hiding in the shadows. What appears to be hate is often envy in a mask. People do not always attack you because they despise what you have. More often, they attack because they secretly crave it and believe they can never attain it. Their insults are simply the echo of a frustrated desire. The envious person does not reflect. They lash out, hoping to tear others down to a level where their own disappointment feels less sharp. Think of the friend who hears about your new opportunity and makes a joke that undercuts your achievement, or the colleague who criticizes your work ethic right after you receive praise. Their attack says far more about what they lack than it does about who you are. As Seneca said, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Envy is a poverty of the soul. It convinces people that the success they see in others only highlights their own emptiness. So instead of facing their own longing, they turn it into an attack. Carl Jung called envy unconscious admiration. This is the paradox. Envy is not the opposite of admiration. It is admiration that has been twisted by pain. When someone envies you, they are confessing that you possess something they value, even if they cannot admit it. Their words may be cruel, but their root is often longing. Once you see envy as a disguised desire, the sting of the insult fades. The attack loses its power over you. You no longer hear it as a reflection of your worth. You hear it as a confession of their own inner void. This truth also applies to us. Ask yourself, when do I criticize someone harshly? Is it truly because they deserve it, or because they trigger a sense of lack in me? Envy, if examined honestly, can be a teacher. It shows us where we long to grow, but have not yet given ourselves permission. So the next time someone tears you down, pause. Don't rush to defend yourself or hate them in return. Instead, ask, what desire are they confessing through this attack? By seeing the envy beneath the surface, you gain clarity and freedom. And what once felt like hatred reveals itself as a mirror of longing. This brings us to a fundamental truth. So many of these patterns, our hidden wounds, our insecurities, our envy, are not born in the present. They are echoes of the past. If you truly want to understand people, don't just look at who they are today. Look at who they were forced to become as children. Because most adults are not operating from new beliefs. They are reenacting old scripts, carrying wounds from years they can barely remember. The child who was ignored often grows into the adult desperate for attention. The child punished for showing emotion becomes the adult who hides their feelings at all costs. The child taught they had to earn love becomes the adult who can never stop performing for approval. The past does not vanish. It repeats silently in the present. Each adult pattern is a confession of a child's wound. To know thyself, as Socrates urged, you must be brave enough to ask, who was I forced to be as a child? Was I the peacekeeper, the performer, the strong one who was never allowed to cry? Those roles did not disappear when childhood ended. They became our unconscious scripts, and unless we confront them, we will continue to act them out, even when they no longer serve us. This cycle repeats, from one generation to the next, unless someone finds the courage to break it. The Stoics would call this the ultimate act of freedom. As Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A person who is not the master of their own mind is a slave to their own past. To attain self-mastery, you must first confront the old narratives, the scripts written for you in childhood. You must see them with clarity, acknowledge their origins, and consciously choose a different path. Otherwise, your childhood will continue to write the story of your adulthood. Consider your own life. Perhaps you avoid conflict because, as a child, conflict was synonymous with pain. Perhaps you endlessly chase recognition because, as a child, achievement was the only currency for visibility. Perhaps you withdraw emotionally because, as a child, you learned that vulnerability was a liability. These are not random behaviors. They are rehearsals of roles written long before you had the power to question them. Marcus Aurelius practiced this very reclamation of self. In his meditations, he constantly reminded himself not to be ruled by the expectations of others, but to live according to reason and virtue. He understood that society, much like childhood, attempts to cast us in a role. And he knew that the only path to freedom was to step back, examine those scripts, and keep only what was true while discarding all that was false. So, how do you begin to break free? The first step is unflinching honesty. Ask yourself, what part of my life feels less like a choice and more like a compulsion? Do I overwork because I truly wish to, or because I learned as a child that love was something to be earned? Do I avoid intimacy because I cherish independence, or because I was taught that closeness inevitably leads to pain? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are the very doorway to freedom. Plato said, "The beginning is the most important part of the work." Childhood was our beginning, and it etched powerful narratives into our minds. But beginnings do not have to dictate endings. With awareness, with reflection, and with the kind of courage the Stoics practiced daily, you can become the author of new narratives. You can learn to live not from your wounds, but from your wisdom. Remember this: people rarely act from new beliefs. They act from old wounds. The child who was ignored becomes the adult desperate for attention. The child punished for showing emotion becomes the adult who hides their feelings. The child who learned that love was conditional becomes the adult who never stops performing. If you want to truly understand someone, or yourself, ask this question: who were they forced to be as a child? The answer will reveal more than any surface behavior ever could. This brings us to a profound truth. Patterns are silent confessions. If you truly wish to know someone, do not just listen to what they say. Watch what they do over and over again. Words can be rehearsed. Masks can be meticulously maintained. But patterns? Patterns do not lie. They slip out quietly, almost unnoticed, yet they reveal the deepest truths of a person's inner world. Someone who vanishes from every relationship is not merely unlucky, they are confessing a fear of intimacy. Someone who fills every waking hour with work is not just ambitious, they are confessing a fear of stillness. Patterns are confessions made not with the tongue, but with a life. If you learn to read them, you can see what people will not even admit to themselves. A person may claim to be fine, confident, or at peace. But if their actions repeat the same story of avoidance, fear, or longing, those actions speak a truth far louder than their words. Patterns are the footprints of the unconscious mind. Follow them, and you will arrive at the core of a person's hidden wounds. Think of how this appears in daily life. A friend who constantly cancels plans at the last minute isn't just busy. They may be confessing that closeness feels overwhelming. A colleague who endlessly brags about working late isn't just dedicated. They may be confessing that silence terrifies them, for it is in silence that they must confront themselves. A partner who repeatedly avoids emotional conversations isn't just bad at talking. They may be confessing that, for them, vulnerability still feels profoundly unsafe. The confession is in the pattern, not the excuse. Aristotle observed that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And habits are simply patterns made permanent. If someone repeatedly lies, cheats, or withdraws, those patterns forge their character. Likewise, if someone consistently shows kindness, patience, or courage, those patterns define them. A single act can be an anomaly. Repeated acts forge an identity. And in those patterns, the soul speaks its truth. Consider relationships again. Have you ever heard someone lament, "I don't know why I keep ending up with the wrong kind of person"? The answer is in their patterns. They may be unconsciously seeking partners who mirror old wounds, choosing neglectful people because neglect feels familiar. Or they may sabotage relationships in the exact same way each time, confessing through their actions that closeness still terrifies them. The words declare, "I want love." The patterns whisper, "I am afraid of it." Which one do you trust? Always the pattern. Patterns reveal whether a person has conquered themselves. The person who reacts with anger time and again has not conquered their temper. The one who withdraws every time conflict arises has not conquered their fear of confrontation. Patterns show where self-mastery exists and where it is absent. To read people is to watch for these victories and failures, written in the language of repetition. But let us not aim this truth only at others. It applies just as powerfully to ourselves. What are your patterns? Do you procrastinate in the face of fear? Do you sidestep difficult conversations? Do you chase validation in a loop that never ends? Each of these habits is a silent confession. The Stoics emphasized daily reflection as a way of catching these patterns. At the end of each day, they would review their actions. Where did I act well? Where did I fall short? Where did I repeat the same mistakes? So here is the practical takeaway. When reading people, do not get lost in their excuses. Excuses change. Patterns do not. If someone disappears every time things get close, that is the truth. If someone fills their life with endless noise to avoid stillness, that is the truth. If someone meets every conflict with anger, that is the truth. The confession is written in the pattern, and when you learn to see it, you stop being fooled by words. Remember this, people will not always tell you about their pain, but their patterns will. If you learn to read their repeated behaviors, the way they avoid, the way they cling, the way they overwork, the way they withdraw, you will learn more than their words could ever reveal. Patterns are silent confessions, and if you have the courage to see them, both in others and in yourself, you will begin to read souls instead of masks. When you step back and truly see people, you realize this. No one is only what they appear to be. Every mask, every silence, every pattern is a clue, pointing to the deeper story of a soul trying to survive. And the more clearly you see others, the more clearly you will see yourself. That is the gift of these truths, not merely to understand people, but to awaken to your own life with honesty and strength. If this message resonates with you, continue the journey. Explore one of the videos now appearing on your screen, and let us walk this path of deeper seeing and wiser living together. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal, where we learn not just to survive, but to live with clarity, courage, and compassion.